Welcome to Ask the Church, our video series where we seek to answer your questions about theology, church practice, or church worship in under 5 minutes. Today's question is, what should I call a member of the clergy? It's a great question. I get asked it from time to time, and oftentimes I'm not very helpful because I basically say whatever you want, and that's not much of an answer. So today we'll attempt to answer that question a little bit more clearly. What should I call a member of the clergy? First, regarding deacons, if you choose not to call them simply their first name, which is always appropriate, deacon plus their first name is a great choice. Deacon Stephen, for instance. The more formal title is the Reverend Deacon Stephen, but we'll come back around to the use of the words the Reverend. Now, regarding priests. The old history of the church was that you would call a priest father plus their first name. For some who are raised Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox, calling a priest Father Stephen is second nature. It feels natural. But for people who are raised in the Protestant world, that can feel very unnatural, and some may even say that it's unbiblical. You might remember Jesus' words in Matthew 23, where he said, "Call no one on earth your father, for you have one Father in heaven." The church did this not because it was breaking the command of Jesus, but because it understood that Jesus was actually forbidding something very particular in that passage. He was actually rebuking the scribes and the Pharisees for their love of honor, and in that context, he used a mode of teaching, a mode of hyperbole that is actually characteristic of his teaching. In another instance, he said, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. We would all look at that and recognize that he's making an important point about the gravity of sin, but the teaching could be stretched to sort of an unnatural extreme if we thought that he was being literal. It's in that context that the church has understood that what he was rebuking in Matthew 23 was the love of honor and the love of titles, and not the word Father itself. After all, if a human child can't call his earthly father, Father, what is he to call him? We realize that his teaching is stressing a certain point about honor and arrogance, but doesn't forbid the use entirely. That actually is a helpful interpretation because Paul calls himself the father of the Corinthian church, and he speaks using that same language of Timothy as his child in the gospel. And if Jesus' teaching is stretched to the very sort of end literal interpretation, it would mean that Paul was actually rejecting Jesus. But for many who are raised in the Protestant world, the word father still feels foreign or perhaps inappropriate, and it's okay not to use it. Another great choice is the word pastor plus the first name. Pastor means shepherd, and just sort of acknowledges that this person has a spiritual responsibility of shepherding the congregation. And so Pastor Stephen or Father Stephen are both great choices. Other choices include the word minister, which is the word for servant, but minister always feels a little odd to me. I think of like the Ministry of Agriculture or something like that, and it feels like something that applies more to government than to church. An old choice, one that's basically lost in our common usage, is the word parson. Parson and the related word parsonage, it refers to the person of the church. In fact, the old Latin phrase was persona ecclesiae, the person of the church, and it was a term that grew up in the medieval Church of England to refer to the person who was in charge of the church, what we would call the rector. From there, it began to be used for all members of the clergy, and parson is an old word that it would actually be kind of fun to revive. I come back around now to the term the Reverend, the one that I mentioned at the beginning. The Reverend is actually a very formal title. It's what we would call an honorific, like His Eminence or Your Grace or Your Honor. The word word Reverend literally means the one to be revered. And it's a very, very honoring title. And it's one that's used in formal settings. It's one that a clergyman would be listed by, but it's one that feels almost too much in terms of ordinary day-to-day usage. So in the end, we come back around to the fact that it's perfectly appropriate in the Anglican world just to call a member of the clergy by their first name. If you want to show a little bit of respect, you can use the word father plus the first name or pastor plus the first name. But I think it's important to remember the spirit of Jesus' teaching in Matthew 23. Love of titles is inappropriate. These things can be used in a way that shows an endearing love or respect or admiration, but they shouldn't be something that makes us revere somebody in an inappropriate way. Hope that this answer helps. Thanks for watching this edition of Ask the Church. If you have further questions, feel free to email them to me at stephen@incarnationrichmond.org. That's Stephen with a V at incarnationrichmond.org. And now, go in the grace of our Lord.